Welcome back, everybody. It's time for another edition of Silver and Black. Today, the Tuesday version. We appreciate you being with us. We are an Audacy Sports original podcast, also heard on the radio in Las Vegas, 101.5 KDON and 840 KXNT. Do us a favor, make sure you subscribe wherever you get your audio. Don't just watch us on video. If you're watching this there, go get the audio as well, so you can listen in the car, on the treadmill, on the bike, wherever it is, or where I'm at right now, trudging through the snow. Wherever you're at, we appreciate that. Don't forget to rate and review. That helps us out significantly. Scott Gulbransen back with my partner, Moe Moton, Moe's senior NFL writer at Bleacher Report covering the NFL. He also is a Raiders columnist at sportsnaut.com. Follow him on X at Moe Moton, MoeMoton. I am at LV Gully, the show, SNB Today. Lots of news to get to, as well as some general subjects around the Raiders. We'll talk about that in segment one, including the Jackson Powers Johnson news that we got. Of course, Tom McMahon fired as special teams coach. We'll get to that. Segment number two, we'll talk a little bit about what's coming up with the Raiders. And of course, segment number three is your calls on the Raider Nation switchboard. Mo, Jackson Powers Johnson, we got the news, of course, on Monday. He is on IR, most likely, based on national reports, most likely gone for the rest of the season. Halfway through the season here, yes, he could come back, but it's highly doubtful based on the reports thus far. So again, Jackson Powers Johnson, who has really had a tumultuous year under first-year coach Pete Killer. Yes, he's killed the Raiders offense. Pete Carroll, as well as offensive coordinator Chip Kelly. Mo, this one is you feel bad for the young man because he's performed well on that much maligned offensive line. That very, very thin offensive line now gets thinner. We're going to see the rookies, I would believe, get in there as well. Will they sign somebody off the street? We'll see. But this is a blow to the Raiders, and especially for Jackson Powers Johnson, who, again, has played well mostly since he had to compete for his starting job, but not good news for the Raiders.
Not good for news for the Raiders. If you saw the graphic during last week's game on Thursday night against the Broncos, before Jackson Powers went out, before he went out, Raiders run the ball fairly well with Ashton Genty. After he went out, run game, ground attack completely plummeted. Couldn't move the ball at all on that right side of the offensive line. So big blow to their ground game, big blow to the offensive line group, which is already missing Colton Miller. We'll see what's going on with Dylan Parham. But now the Raiders are in a situation where pass protection takes a hit, the run blocking takes a hit, and Jackson Powers Johnson now, in my opinion, has an uncertain future because his team, in my opinion, is not as high on as fans are. So there's no guarantee that Jackson Powers Johnson is going to play out 2026 and the rest of his rookie deal with the Las Vegas Raiders.
Well, and Mo, let me ask you this though: when you say that, because is it the organization not high on JPJ, or is it this coaching staff?
I believe it's the coaching staff more so Chip Kelly, simply because Pete Carroll is a defensive-minded head coach.
Right.
Chip Kelly is the highest paid offensive coordinator in the league. You don't think Chip Kelly has to say so and bringing in Alex Kappa and having Alex Kappa compete for the starting job? You have to put two and two together here and say this is probably more so a Chip Kelly preference than it is a Pete Carroll preference.
Right. And let me take a quick pause. It is Veterans Day today. So all of you out there, I know we have a lot of veterans who listen to the show, that call into the show, in our families, friends. So happy Veterans Day to all of you who served our country out there. Just want to shout out to you guys and thank you for your service. Back to the offensive line. Now, here's what I want to make sure of, Mo. You ready for me? I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant here. And that is, Pete Carroll's been the man of excuses. If he uses Jackson Powers Johnson as an excuse, I might lose it, because he is the guy that has been squelching his development along with Chip Kelly, as you mentioned. So there's no making excuses for the loss of Jackson Powers Johnson, because you, Mr. Carroll, have been the guy who's been the impediment to him playing, being where he's supposed to be. So I don't want to hear that, Mo. I don't want to hear it. I know they will use it because this Raider team, let's face it, not trying to throw the proverbial wet towel on you all out there and have you tune out right away. But this team's not going anywhere. Geno Smith is done. There's no late surge from him coming on in late season. We've seen nothing to indicate that. So I've given up on him. And so I don't want to see Pete Carroll give excuses. Now we've lost another offensive lineman. Well, which it's true. Had he not treated the situation as it's been, then maybe I could see him using it legitimately. But Mo, the excuses, there's just no excuses for what's happening here. And yes, the line is thin. It was to begin with. They didn't have enough talent up there, but it'll drive me nuts if he does that.
I could see him doing that anyway, only because, as I said, I think this is more of a Chip Kelly personnel decision than it is a Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll is going to stick by his offensive coordinator, though he criticized him. But I think this is more of a Chip Kelly thing. The other side of this is with Jackson Powers Johnson out. Now my biggest question is, do we see Caleb Rogers actually be active on game day? Because you drafted this guy in the 3rd round. I know he played mostly right tackle at Texas Tech, but when you draft a player in the 3rd round, not that you expect him to be a starter, an instant starter, but you expect him to at least be active on game day. So that's what I'm looking at going forward.
Now, Mo, we don't spend much time on this show calling. We never call for someone to be fired, right? It's not like we go on some big rant. Some people do that. More power to you. That's how you want to do your show. We don't do it here, but it was clear that whatever Tom McMahon was doing on special teams was not working. In fact, this move probably should have been made 2 weeks ago. Then you see Pete Carroll get into it on the sidelines with Tom McMahon during the Thursday night game. And then, of course, the next day we hear Tom McMahon is out in Las Vegas. They now have a chance to maybe try to breathe some new life. And I said it last week, hey, why not give somebody else a chance and see if it wakes up the special teams? But the special teams for the Raiders has been the worst in the league. It continued in the Thursday night loss. Not surprised by it. Of course, the offensive line hasn't gotten better. Now they have injuries, so there's excuses for daddy to make for son. So you're not going to see, as we said all along, you're not going to see Brennan Carroll and that weird eye thing he does gone anytime soon. But this was the first change mid-season for the Raiders. Do you think it will be the last?
I thought about this. I gave this some thought, and I think there'll be, if there are any changes, I could see another position coach being fired simply because the wide receivers haven't developed the way, I guess many people thought they should. Dante Thornton Jr. had a drop last Thursday. He had a penalty that called back a touchdown. Jack Besh, his highlight of the game last Thursday was a penalty that called back Ashton Jenkins' 30-plus yard run. So the wide receivers haven't come along as we thought. So who do you blame for that? The wide receivers coach. Though I think you should blame Chip Kelly. Again, I think a little bit of blame should go back to Chip Kelly. He is the offensive coordinator. He is trying to put these guys in their best position to make plays and succeed. But I can see the Raiders pointing to their wide receiver coaches saying, our wide receivers aren't further along than we thought. We need to change direction at that position.
Right. And while I don't agree with everyone out there who was concerned, I didn't think it would necessarily happen that Tyler Lockett, the signing of Tyler Lockett, would mean less snaps for the rookies. Now, it has to a certain degree. But what we saw Thursday night, to your point, I heard a lot of you out there who listen to the show, watch the show, just clamor for these guys to get opportunities. You just laid out some of the shortcomings, which lies with the player and, as you mentioned, the coaching staff. So you get your rookies. Doesn't mean your rookies are going to perform as well as they should. Some of that does, as you said, go on coaching. But you also have to understand you want rookies to play. Now we just talked about offensive linemen in the same breath. You're going to see this kind of stuff, and when you have shoddy coaching, those rookies aren't necessarily set up for success.
They aren't, but I said this on my Bleach Report Live after Thursday's game. I think most of us wanted the rookies to be active and to play and be on the field, have some playing time, significant playing time.
Yeah.
The point of having the rookies play is to let them make their mistakes and learn from them, right? So they're rookies. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to have holding penalties. They're going to have illegal pick plays called against them. They're going to have drops. It's going to happen as rookies. They're going to make mistakes. They're learning on the job. What I would prefer is to see Dante Thornton Jr. and Jack Besh make their mistakes as time goes along than to see Tyler Lockett be featured in the offense. So
right.
He's there to help Geno Smith. He's a crutch for Geno Smith, if we're being honest about it. That's why they brought him in. Not only because he's a cushion for letting go of Jakobi Myers, who went to Jacksonville, but it was to help Geno Smith along, who was struggling. Now, of course, Brock Bowers is the biggest help Geno Smith can get, a healthy Brock Bowers. But the rapport that Geno Smith has with Tyler Lockett will certainly help going forward, and that's why you're seeing the connection between them in games active. But the rookies being active and playing is a start, and they're making mistakes, and they're going to make more mistakes, Scott. But the point is, where are they now compared to where they're going to be at the end of the season? You want to see that development.
You're absolutely correct, and that's my expectation. Is I expect rookies. I'm not piling on for the penalties and for the drop passes because that's just what happens. I think fans' expectations are out of whack. I think fans think these guys are going to come out there, and if they're good, they're going to just suddenly turn it on, and the Raiders are going to start winning games. It's not going to happen that way. But it is a necessary evil, especially in a year where you're absolutely going nowhere. Now, you talked about Brock Bowers. The Brock Bowers of 3 targets, 3 against the Denver Broncos in what was one of the most disgustingly painful games that I've had to watch. There's been 3 or 4 of those for the Raiders this year. I mean, literally, I'm not even talking because it was the Raiders. I'm talking just watching football. Mo, as much football as you and I watch, that was brutal. I called it, again, 2 drunk guys fighting. It was terrible. The Broncos looked terrible. The Raiders looked terrible. And it was just a exercise in futility between these 2 teams. Yet the Raiders had every opportunity to jump out and try to win this game. But in my view, Geno Smith, again, crapped the bed. Geno Smith could not find anybody. He couldn't find targets. He looked rattled. He held the ball, again, too long. People arguing with me on the X, well, he doesn't have any time because they're coming in. They're rushing the passer, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, we called that, by the way, last week when we said Denver's got a really good defensive front, and they're going to bring it. Benito's a great player. They're going to do it. But Geno Smith, listen, well, he's only got 3 seconds. Yeah, well, you watch good quarterbacks in the NFL, they get the ball out within 2, okay? So my question for you is, I mean, and maybe I'm just still dumbfounded by the complete blind loyalty here. And I'm not one of these wackos out there who thinks that Aiden O'Connell is going to be some star in the NFL, because he's not. But what the hell is it going to take now? You talk about going to the younger players. You're now past that midpoint. You got a tough road ahead. You got a couple games, the Giants, the Browns. Yeah. Of course, the Giants on Monday fired Brian Dable. He took the blame for everything that's happened in New York. But is this quarterback, can Pete Carroll honestly say he gives them the best chance to win? Because I don't think so. Not until you see the other 2 guys start.
For now, we can only take Pete Carroll's word for it, right? Because we don't know what these guys look like at practice. But I think this is all the whole Geno Smith conversation, and this is not directed toward you, Scott.
No.
I think it's wasted energy because they gave up a 3rd round pick for Geno Smith. They gave him an extension. He's going to at least start the first full year. Even if the Raiders decide after the first year, this Geno Smith thing is not working with him and Pete Carroll, right? That may happen. I doubt that as well, because I think even if they were to draft a rookie quarterback, they're going to want a veteran there just to be an extended stopgap. But Geno Smith is going to start this year. As bad, Geno Smith can stink it up for the next 3 weeks. He's going to start for the rest of the season because of what the Raiders invested in him. And if we know anything about these GMs and teams and coaches, they don't like to admit mistakes fairly early. We as fans or as observers can see things before coaches can see them or admit to them, at least, right? We've been calling for Tom McMahon to get fired a month ago. The Raiders just got around to firing him last week. But teams are going to stick to their investments, especially if they gave up a early round draft pick and paid a guy some money. Now, I get the Denver Broncos moved on from Russell Wilson and incurred a bunch of dead cap, but Russell Wilson started a full season with Denver before they made that decision. I get that the Falcons moved on from Kirk Cousins within 1 year of giving him a massive deal, but they had Michael Penix Jr. in the building already, a first-round pick. The Raiders don't have a recent first-round pick in the building. They have Kenny Pickett, but I mean, in the draft of the same year that they're playing in, they don't have a rookie first-rounder on the roster who they're thinking, this is going to be our future quarterback, where they can say, well, we can bench Geno and we'll just start the future now. that isn't the case for the Raiders. Kenny Pickett is not the future in Las Vegas. And if the Raiders are planning to draft a quarterback in next year's draft, they're going to have Geno Smith keep the seat warm for that player, whoever it is.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And the Raiders averaging 15.4 points per game. Next to last, only the Tennessee Titans are worse. Okay. So this Raider team can't score. And you know what, Mo? I don't think it's going to get any better. I don't think this team's going to be able to score points against anybody. Now, the Browns, who of course lost to the Jets, which helped the Raiders in the draft lottery, if you want to call it that. It's not a real lottery, but as far as getting up there in the top three, of course, the Tennessee Titans right now have the number one pick. And they got their quarterback of the future. So that's good for the Raiders if they want to try to move up, if they love one of these quarterbacks coming out. But I don't see this team getting any better. I see performances. I mean, I see Brock Bowers having big days and scoring some touchdowns. But this team can't move the ball. Geno Smith can't move the offense. When he does move the offense occasionally, yes, they can capitalize on it. But I would not expect this offense to be exciting, to score more than 20 points a game. I just don't see it happening. And so I think for you guys out there, for Raider fans, as we've said through the past several weeks, look for those young guys to play if they get their chance and just watch them, because otherwise you're going to get frustrated. You're going to see a lot of what you've seen, because I don't think a lot is going to change. Mo, before we hit the break, anything else on where this team's going, considering the injury to Jackson Powers-Johnson, considering the performance of Geno Smith and some of the other things we've talked about on offense?
As you said, Scott, not many wins coming up, but look forward to development. I go back to Dave Casper, the Ghost's comment about what he wanted to see this season. He said he wasn't going to be super focused on the win-loss column. He's going to be focused on the development. And at 2-7, if you're a Raider fan, that's what you're looking at. Who's here? Who's going to be here for the future? And who's not going to be here? And who's developing? Who's getting better?
That's right. All right, we're going to step aside for our first break, pay some bills here. When we come back, we're going to get back to talking about the Raiders. We'll talk a little bit about the defense. We'll talk also about you, Raider Nation. I have some concerns. And Mo actually had some concerns too, because he got into some nice discussions on X this week regarding a former coach. We'll talk about that when we come back here on Silver and Black today, an Audacy Sports original podcast. Don't go anywhere. All right, it is Gully. It's time to tell you about our good friends at Sleeper Picks, of course, official sponsors here of Silver and Black today. If you don't play daily fantasy football already, or if you're playing it somewhere else, what are you doing? You got to get to the Sleeper Picks app and join Moe Moton and I here playing daily fantasy football. Not only that, but if you use the code GENTY, as in Ashton Genty, the code GENTY, they will match your first deposit up to $100 only from your friends here at Silver and Black today. So make sure you do that. I'm going to give you my picks for Thursday night's game. Mo will give you Thursday night picks on Thursday's show. So let's jump right in. I'm starting with the New York Jet here. Of course, Justin Fields. Will Justin Fields pass for a TD in this game? Listen, I like Justin Fields. He just can't get it right now. He's in a bad situation with the Jets. I don't know why he went there other than the bag. So I'm taking no on that one. I'm saying Justin Fields will not get a touchdown pass in this game. Drake May, on the other hand, 249.5 yards. You betcha. We got that one for Drake May. Then also Trayvon Henderson. I like this kid out of Ohio State. He's starting to find his stride. They're starting to get him more mixed into this offense. Will he have an anytime touchdown? I think so. I'm going, actually, he's going to have 2+ touchdowns in this one. I'm going on a limb, folks. So my sleeper picks for Thursday's game in daily fantasy football: Justin Fields of the Jets will not have a touchdown pass. Drake May, he's going to pass for over 249.5 yards. There's a 2 times boost on that one, so make sure you check that one out. And Trayvon Henderson, the rookie out of the Ohio State, is going to have 2 touchdowns. You heard it here first. 2 touchdowns, a $20 wager on that one gets you $135. Come, pick with me. Go right now to the Sleeper app. Deposit up to $100. They're going to match up to $100. So you're going to have $200 to play daily fantasy football with Gully. Go do it. Rules and regulations apply. Make sure you check out the Sleeper app or Sleeper website for details. Not available in every state, but most likely your state. So check out the Sleeper Picks app. Play daily fantasy football with me for the Thursday night game. And don't forget, use the code GENTY. Get that free money, $100 deposit, and you're going to get another $100 from the folks at Sleeper. Come on, join me on the Sleeper Picks app. Let's go, folks. We'll see you then. Welcome back. Segment number 2 of Silver and Black today, the Tuesday edition, an Audacy Sports original podcast. Thanks for being with us. Don't forget, 2, subscribe, rate, and review. Moe Moton, Scott Gulbransen back with you talking Raiders football. And Mo, I want to talk about Pete Carroll. Does he get a year 2, number 1? But first, or second, but I'm going to move it to first, is I listen, I understand, and I want to be gentle here. So I'm going to put on my kit gloves a little bit. And that is Raider Nation's been through a lot, especially if you're a younger fan. If you're under 30, it's been rough. For the old tooths out there who we hear from on the phone lines and in chat and so on, we know you saw some championships, you saw some runs, you saw some of the great teams, especially if you're my age. But for younger Raider fans, it's been a lot of misery. So I see a lot of them continually wanting to go back in time. They want to be Marty McFly, get in the DeLorean, and go back with Dr. Brown to a time when they had better feelings. You were getting into some discussions because I saw a lot of people. Everybody wants Pete Carroll gone. We get it. We're going to talk whether or not that can happen or not in a moment. But you got into some discussions around John. A lot of people now, there's a resurgence of bring back Gruden 3.0. That's where we need to go. He was turning the team in the right direction. A lot of revisionist history is happening with days of yore, okay? With days going back to John Gruden Part 2, going back to Jack Del Rio, of course, the last time the Raiders made the playoffs. Or excuse me, the last time the Raiders had a really good season and made the playoffs, not including the broken year when Gruden was out and they made it and lost to the Bengals. But Mo, talk us through this, because why are people doing this, and do they forget? I'm not saying John Gruden was all bad. What I am saying, though, is they forget the results. They're falling in love with the personality and the history, but not talking results. Talk about this whole idea of going back in time to a guy like John Gruden.
So I'll start here. So I got into a conversation with a bunch of people on X, and there's a group of Raider fans who feel like the Raiders would be better off with John Gruden, and he was their last successful, and I put in air quotes, successful head coach, right? So let's go through John Gruden's second stint. Not his first stint, his second stint, right? Because this is what we were talking about on X. He was 22-31 in his second stint with the Raiders. He had 3 full seasons. Of course, he resigned after the emails in Washington were leaked. He finished that season 3-2, and then Rich Bisaccia took over. But his first 3 full seasons, no winning seasons. 4-12, 7-9, 8-8. Now you're going to say, Mo, that's progress. That's headed in the right direction. That's better than what we have now. And what my reply to those people was, up your standards. If you think 4-12, 7-9, 8-8 in 3 years, 3 full years is success, because that's what they were arguing, that we were successful under John Gruden. We were headed toward turning this thing around. Let's not forget that John Gruden and his regime squandered a bunch of draft picks because they traded away Khalil Mack. They traded away Amari Cooper. They had all of these draft picks that were supposed to turn it around, right? You've seen teams turn around within 1 year with fewer draft picks. They just had 1 year, they had 3 first-rounders, and they used them on John Abram, used draft picks on Damon Arnett within those 2 years. I believe it was 2019, 2020, right?
Yep.
And where did the Raiders end up? They didn't make the playoffs until after John Gruden had resigned. So it wasn't even John Gruden who got the Raiders to the playoffs in 2021. It was Rich Bisaccia. And let's not forget what the Raiders were looking like in November, December, and January under John Gruden. John Gruden was 5-10 in December, January games in his second stint. John Gruden has a history of starting off pretty fast in his seasons and fading at the end. So you cannot assume that because the Raiders were 3-2 before he resigned, that they were going to make the playoffs with him. Even in his first stint, he had issues in November, December, and January finishing seasons. The Raiders would start strong and end weak. I remember because I remember those seasons as a teenager. Mm-hmm. And people want this guy back. And I've been saying time and time again, for the Raiders to get out of this mess, they have to draft well. That's one of the key things the Raiders need to do. Draft well. What is John Gruden very horrible? What is he bad at? What did he squander? A bunch of draft picks. So why would you want John Gruden back, knowing when he comes in, wherever he goes, he's going to want personnel power? Even if you say, hey, bring in a general manager who's experienced with John Gruden. You think John Gruden is going to tuck his ego and let a general manager make all the picks for him? That ain't going to happen. John Gruden is going to have say-so in his personnel and his roster personnel, and he's going to squander another draft and another draft. And you're going to say, why did we bring back John Gruden? He is terrible at roster management. And people want him back, Scott.
You hit on it at the top, Mo, which is raise your expectations. Now, some people will try to argue this, Mo, and say, well, okay, but bring him back as a coach. And to your point, he's not going to come back as a coach and without player. We believe, we don't have concrete evidence, but all of the circumstantial evidence points to the fact that even Pete Carroll has more control than we'd like him to have with John Spytek as a young first-time GM, right? So this is my point. You don't go back in time, folks. It's not 1999. It's not 2001. It's not any of that. You have to think forward. And to me, I'm okay if you say, hey, I'd love if they move on from Pete Carroll after year one. Okay, I can buy that if you get the right young offensive coach. Look what Ben Johnson has done in Chicago. The guy that Tom Brady couldn't close the deal on. Apparently, he did the interview as a favor or as a nice gesture to the GOAT, Tom Brady. But Tom Brady, let's face it, he's got to take responsibility. He couldn't convince Ben Johnson that the Raider dysfunction was done with, and that if he came to Las Vegas without a young quarterback and all that they would get him where he needs to go. Because Ben Johnson understood he had a window in time in the NFL. You see coaches get blown out sometimes after a year or 2, 3 if they're lucky, if they don't get successful right away. And Ben Johnson said, well, wait a minute, I can go to Chicago, which has also been a mess. Don't get me wrong, organizationally, but they got the young quarterback, and Caleb Williams took him a long time. Do I like Caleb Williams? He's kind of weird, but he's coming along slowly, a little slower than some would anticipate, but he's making progress. The Bears are 6-3. And this is the problem. You need to go get a young coach that fits with your young GM. That's not John Gruden. That's not Jack Del Rio. That's not the ghost of anybody else who used to coach the Raiders. You can't live in the past. The past is not going to dictate a successful future, Mo. And I stayed out of that discussion, right? I've shot back at a couple of people with that respectfully, but it blows my mind. To your point, higher expectations are what I think older fans, you're talking guys in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, and even your age, Mo, who are saying, no, this used to be the franchise. This used to be the top of the line. And we don't look back on things. We remember and respect the history, but we don't want to go back in history. We want to go forward. And the only way to go forward is to find somebody who's living in today, who's got young talent, who can come in and get the job done.
And I know what people are going to say, and I just remember this as you were talking, Scott. Mike Mayock took the blame or the fall for the Damon Arnett pick. Okay, you can have that. But guess what? You know who else John Gruden drafted and probably had to say so because he's an offensive-minded head coach? Brian Edwards, who was supposed to be great after a great offseason. What happened? Lynn Bowden Jr., who was supposed to be the joker of the offense. What happened? They traded him before he even played a regular season game. You remember Alex Leatherwood? Remember that first round pick? How that went under John? I know John Gruden was only there for a third of a season, but he was there when they drafted Alex Leatherwood. You don't think John Gruden has say-so and drafted Alex Leatherwood, who is not an NFL player? So for the people who want to argue John Gruden is a better coach than he is a GM, fine. Yes, that's correct. But as I said, show me a place where John Gruden hasn't had roster personnel power after his first Raiders stint under Al Davis. Show me where he's gone anywhere and said, you know what, I'm going to take my hands off the roster personnel management, and I'm just going to let the GM do all of that. At this stage in his career as a Super Bowl winning head coach, he's going to want that power, and he's going to impact who the Raiders drafted if they were to hire him for a 3.0 stint. And all I'm saying, as you said, Scott, is we need to move forward. We need to look ahead. Let's stop living in the past. Let's stop trying to recreate what happened 20 years ago, 25 years ago. Get a young offensive-minded head coach in there with an experienced GM and roll from there. Because the Raiders, apparently, they need some experience in the front office. And in my opinion, they need to freshen up their offense with some new ideas.
And let me wag my finger if you're watching this on video. Remember, all of you, and I was one of them, who wanted the Raiders to move on from Derek Carr. Now, remember, because we knew it, as surprising as it was, but as it's come out afterwards, after that all went down, who protected and made the Raiders stick with Derek Carr longer? John Gruden.
John Gruden.
So if you're a John Gruden fan and you weren't a Derek Carr fan, or you were in favor of them moving on from Derek Carr, respectfully moving on, who was the guy who made sure it didn't happen? Who was the guy who squelched signing Tom Brady?
It was
John Gruden. So just remember that. Now, let's switch gears to the current head coach, Pete Carroll, because we've talked about this before. But I'm seeing a lot of people I respect, national media pundits, former NFL folks, who are now coming around to, and they always speak of Pete Carroll with high level of respect, which he does deserve. Absolutely. He's accomplished a lot in football. You got to give him that. But a lot of them now are starting to intimate and get around to, well, I could see Pete Carroll not being there next year. What are the chances, Mo? Because I think if the Raiders have the ability to be in a position, now they might not finish in the bottom 2 or 3 in the league. Okay. Let's say they win 1 or 2 more games, which I don't know if that's possible. I think it is. Browns and the Giants, perhaps. But if they do, and they're in the top 3 or even the top 5, and they can move up and draft one of these quarterbacks like Mendoza or whoever you're in love with at this point, that's appealing to a young coach coming in. So the time to make a change, if you're the Raiders and you're John Spytek and Tom Brady, might be then. It might not be, look, Pete, we would love to give you another year, but man, we got to move on because we need somebody to come in. We got a young quarterback coming in. And I would not trust, I'm sorry, Chip Kelly and Pete Carroll to develop a young quarterback if I go get a young quarterback. What are the chances right now? I'm saying right now, based on where their draft order is, which could change, of course, that it's probably only a 30 or 40% chance that Pete Carroll's not back next year. But if things go on and they continue and the Raiders are in striking distance of getting that quarterback, if that's what they want to do, then I could see it going up to 50, 60%. What do you say?
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment. I think if the Raiders finish with a top 5 draft pick, then I think the percentage increases because then you have to think, do you trust Pete Carroll and the staff to develop that quarterback? Right? That's a question that I'm sure Tom Brady's going to have some input on because he actually talked about this on a Fox show that a lot of times we blame these quarterbacks for not playing well, but we don't look at who the offensive coordinator is. We don't rank these offensive coordinators. You have a good offensive coordinator or a bad one. So I don't know what he thinks of Chip Kelly, but if the Raiders are picking 10, 11, 12, then I think it's less likely because then I think it's more likely you're going to start the year with Geno Smith as your quarterback. And if you're starting the year with Geno Smith as your quarterback, you probably have Pete Carroll as your head coach.
Right. But the problem there is, well, you'll know at the end of the year, like you said, what your draft order is. And if you were top 5, chances go way up because then you have to make a choice then because you need to get somebody in to prepare for the draft. Now, Spytek and scouts are doing that, yes. But you also need your coach on board right away so that they can be involved in that process. Again, they're not going to make the pick, but they, depending on who they get as an offensive coordinator, all that stuff works into your draft strategy and what player you prioritize. So yes. So for those of you who want them to move on from Pete Carroll, again, I don't think NFL teams purposefully tank, right? There's the soft tank, if you want to call it, which is you just devote as many snaps to young developmental players as possible, and you let the chips fall where they may. And I think if the Raiders are in that position, because now Pete Carroll, as much as he thinks he can win, now you get into week 11, 12, 13, you can't justify saying, well, we still got a chance. No, you don't. You don't have a chance. So you need to start to see those young players. And these were the conversations behind the scenes need to happen between Spytek, Brady, ownership, and i.e. Mark Davis to say, Pete, look, we need to see what these guys got because we need to prepare for our draft and free agent class next year. So it'll be interesting. And I think that's, to me, the storylines that we got to follow here. And so you're right. A lot depends on it. If they end up finishing where they're drafting 12th, yeah, I see a repeat of next year, of this year, I should say. Maybe Chip Kelly's there, maybe he's not, depending what he decides to do. But it's fascinating because I think we seem to say this every year, Mo, so maybe it sounds like I'm the boy crying wolf. But this is going to be another critical offseason for this team because if they can't get out of this rut, it's going to be hard because then you start thinking 3-5 years again down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. But these conversations we're going to definitely revisit after the season's over. Does Pete Carroll stay? Does he go? Does Chip Kelly stay or go? These are conversations that are impossible to answer now. What if Pete Carroll gets up and says, this is not going the way I thought it was, and I understand this is going to be a long rebuild. I'm 74 years old. I'm going to step down. That could happen too. I don't think it will, but you have to at least put it on the table. If common sense kicks in, he realizes, look, I'm going to be 75 by the time we kick off in 2026, and we have a rookie quarterback, we have a young roster. Am I going to be able to be there to develop these guys beyond 1 or 2 years? And if he feels that he isn't, then he's got to step down. But the problem, though, is what is his succession plan? Because that was the conversation this past offseason, right?
Yep,
Pete Carroll's going to come in with a succession plan. So if he's stepping down, he is probably going to tab. He could probably have some say-so or some sway on who's the next head coach, and whoever that may be will have to step up and take over.
And the only candidate I see is Chip Kelly, and I don't think that would be a good choice.
I don't think that would be a great choice either.
No, especially with his record in the NFL. No. It hasn't been good. It hasn't been good. So there you go. All right. We're going to take our final break. When we come back, we're going to get to your calls. We love your calls. We love to answer your calls. I'm sure we got some interesting ones coming off that loss last week. And of course, Monday night coming up is the Raiders and the Cowboys. And the Cowboys defense is pretty bad, Mo. And boy, if that offense can't move against the Cowboys, then the Raiders could compete for the number 1 pick in the draft. I'll tell you that much. So we'll get to that and your calls here in just a minute. You're with Mo and Scott. This is Silver and Black today. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the final segment, home stretch here on Silver and Black today, an Audacy Sports original podcast. Do us a favor, subscribe, rate, and review. Moe Moton, Scott Gulbransen back with you, Raider Nation, coming off the loss against the Broncos and getting you prepped. And we'll talk later in the week about the Cowboys coming up. Don't forget, we will also have Murph and I will be back with a post-game show after that Monday Night Football game, a late night. Should be interesting at Allegiant Stadium. So Vegas will be pumping on a Monday night, despite the fact that the Raiders. And I got to say this, I know the stadium fills sometimes with visiting fans, and Cowboy fans travel pretty well, Mo. But this year, even despite the way the Raiders have been, it's been pretty good with crowds at Allegiant Stadium being vast majority of Raider fans. But did you see the Jets game there in New York, Mo? How empty the Jets stadium was, MetLife Stadium was after all the trades and all that. Fans just checked out. And then, of course, they win against the Browns.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what happens when you trade 2-star defensive players in Quentin Williams and Sauce Gardner. Fans, that's an indication to fans that we're punting on the 2025 season, and then they turn around and win their first home game of the year, which is so odd. The Jets have had the strangest season. They lose their first 7 games. They win without Garrett Wilson and Sauce Gardner. They trade Sauce Gardner and Quentin Williams and win again. I don't think they beat the Patriots on Thursday, but just an odd season here in New York for the Jets.
And their special teams. I mean, that was the difference in that game. And of course, the Browns just brown. So that helped them out significantly. All right, let's get to your phone calls. We're going out first to California, where the gas is $7-8 a gallon. It is Brian in Sacramento.
All right, this is Brian from Sacramento. It is Friday, the day after that. Oh God, I can't even call it a football game. It was so bad. But just got the news they fired finally the special teams coach McMahon, which was a long time coming. And I'll take some positivity. And I never want to shed, someone's job like that. Like, hey man, it's nothing to be taken lightly. But I'm sure the guy got paid, so let's not cry too much in the sky. Anyway, the concern again is that Spytek, if he is not an empty suit, if he really is a GM, how he looked at the alignment within Pete Carroll, that this was going to be a retool, not a rebuild. Well, I hate to see them do a rebuild because they really failed miserably at this retool, considering they looked at the offensive line as it was and did little to no patchwork to improve it, with the signing of Kappa and, whoever the hell other ex-Seahawk that they deemed to be, good. So, I don't know, man. It's going to be a high draft pick. I really can't find a win down the line, and I really don't care. Again, like many Raider fans, we've checked out. We're doing mock drafts. I'm playing Madden on franchise mode to get through my therapy. But anyways, I love you guys' show. Don't have a question for you, just more of a vent. But yeah, Brock Bowers, bro. I bought a brand new Brock Bowers jersey delivered Thursday, right before game time. I was so happy. And to let them go and give him 3 targets for 1 catch after going crazy against the Jags, it was sad. So next week or next game is Monday. I will watch because that's what Raider fans do. So again, thank you guys for being there, and I'll catch you later.
Brian in Sacramento, man, thanks for the call. We appreciate it, and we're glad that we can be some therapy to you as well as Madden, firing up franchise mode. Hopefully you have a quarterback in franchise mode in Madden. But Mo, listen, Raider Rube, one of our listeners who comes on, does some live drop-in videos on our post-game show, he said it several weeks ago. He said, guys, this was never a retool. This is a complete rebuild. And anybody who thought it was crazy. And I was one of those people. I thought, well, maybe they could piece it together, get more competitive. I was wrong on that one. But there's no question, Mo, this is a complete rebuild. I said it last week. This roster is devoid of talent at key positions. It has some talent. Don't get me wrong. You mentioned Brock Bowers. Of course, there's other players too, Ashton Genty, others. But this is a complete rebuild. No question.
By the way, feel free to call in and vent if you need to vent, because there's going to be a lot of venting this season. There's been a lot of venting with this Raider team over the past few years. So if you need to call in and just let us steam, that's fine, especially after the game we watched last Thursday. But yeah, this is a rebuild. But what I'll also say is they may have some pieces to have in that rebuild in John Spytek's draft class. Now, again, he drafted 11 rookies. We don't know, outside of Ashton Genty, we haven't really seen much of these guys play. Started to see bits of Darian Porter and Dante Thornton Jr. and Jack Besh, of course, but we have no clue if these guys could be long-term assets or short-term assets. If they develop well in the second half of the season, it's you have building blocks for this rebuild, and you can kind of jumpstart it. You won't have to start completely from scratch. Now, of course, you still need the quarterback, but you're going to have a ton of cap space next offseason. You have a big draft class. You're hoping develops, and you're going to already have some extra picks from the Jakobi Myers trade as well. So, and their comp picks they're going to get from losing players in free agency this year. So the Raiders are going to have a bunch of picks. They're going to have another big draft class coming in 2026. So between 2025 and 2026, they may have 20 players who are in their first or second year.
Yeah.
And that's what you want to rebuild. Now, again, they have to get the quarterback right, but they're going to have a bunch of young players. This is going to be a very young roster for the foreseeable future.
Absolutely. And for those of you who want to fire John Spytek already, and you said this last week, Mo, you can't evaluate a GM that fast. And for the point you just made, which is the GM doesn't dictate who starts and who doesn't, right? Because our good friend MDM out in Hawaii was saying, well, this hasn't been a good draft class. Well, we don't know. And his argument back, which was logical, which he said, yeah, but if they were that good, they'd be playing. Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Use your JPJ argument there as well, right? Which is, I mean, it's the same thing.
Some coaches are just stubborn. We can all see that JPJ is one of the best Raiders offensive linemen, but they feel he should be competing. So you can't even say, well, if they were that good, they'd be playing, because JPJ is obviously should be starting. He should have been solidified as a starter long ago before he got hurt. But the coaching staff disagrees with that. So how can we trust this coaching staff to evaluate certain players or who should be playing and who shouldn't be playing?
Right. All right. Appreciate the call. Now we're moving on to our buddy Yandog. Here's Yandog.
Hey, Mo. Hey, Scott. Yandog. I'll make it short and sweet. The Raiders are playing competitive. They're staying close in their games. I'm happy with that. but hopefully they're going to get their act together and put two things together, the offense and defense. It was tough the last couple of games, 1 point in overtime, and they should have won that game. And then this past week, though, to losing to the oh God, who the hell was it?
Broncos.
The Jaguars.
Broncos.
The Broncos.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Gotcha.
Hesitation. I had to figure out who it was. And that was a close 10-7. I mean, my buddy there, he thought it was going to be a massacre, but they played them tough. But it seems like if they play good on offense, the defense then doesn't do anything, or just vice versa. But at least they're competitive, though. And hopefully it's going to get better. But, you know, it's just frustrating, like I said. But I am not going to be a poet and think I know it, because I'm not going to be doing that thing I did last week. But
that was good.
I hope that they can bounce around. And I just don't have any interest with Pete Carroll bringing all these guys over from the Seahawks. And that's about all I got to say. And I'm hanging in there and trying to be positive. All right. And that's about it, guys. Yan Dog, over and out.
All right. We got our barks in from Yan Dog and Yan Dog. You know what, Mo? Being positive, even in the midst of a bad season or misery or a bad day at work or whatever, it's a choice. So Yan Dog, despite all this stuff going on, is choosing to be positive. I can appreciate that.
I can appreciate that as well. I mean, he started the season off so positive. Yandog had high hopes. If you remember, Yandog had high hopes for this team. I think
Yes,
he had
he did.
11 wins.
Yep.
So to just kind of take a deep breath and just kind of look at it and say, you know, I'm not feeling the whole Pete Carroll regime, but I'm still going to be positive about this football team and just look for the positive notes is a good thing. I will say, too, to Yandog's call, the Raiders' losses against the Jaguars and the Bears, I hate to put it on one person, but if they just had their special teams unit together in those games, you know, if they get the field goal off against the Bears, if Daniel Carlson doesn't miss the extra point, it changes the complexion of the Jaguars' plans late in that game. They have to score a touchdown instead of settling for a field goal. If their special teams unit had just been intact and been decent, the Raiders could be 4-5. Now, I know what you're saying. You are what your record says you are, coulda, woulda, shoulda. But this is how thin the margins are in the NFL. You're an extra point and a block field goal away from being around 500, and we're having a much different conversation about this Raider team than we are having at 2-7. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at the season in necessity.
Right. Broncos are a good example. You look at their record. If you look at their record on paper, like, wow, but then you look at who they beat and how close those games were, it's not that impressive, right? So to your point about margins, and listen, bad teams lose games like that. They just find a way to lose. We see it every single weekend. It just happens that way. Saw it with the Browns against the Jets that we just talked about. So there you go. Yandog, I appreciate it. All right, now we're going out to Vegas. Matt's calling us from Sin City. Here we go.
Hey, this is Matt here in Las Vegas, and I just want to say something. This is my first time calling in, but something has become incredibly apparent, and that is that nobody in this league respects Mark Davis as an owner. He is the laughingstock of the NFL, and that is why we keep ending up with coaches that nobody else was even considering. No one was considering Gruden. No one else was considering McDaniels. No one else was considering AP. And I guarantee you, no one else was considering Pete Carroll. And that is why we have coaches that are essentially just here to collect a paycheck, because they do not actually care about winning. Pete Carroll is already a Hall of Famer. He does not care if he wins with the Raiders. Chip Kelly does not care if he wins. He is here because Mark Davis is dumb enough to give him $6 million a year. And he knows as soon as he gets fired, he can just go back to college. So if anything, it's actually in their incentive to coach poorly, because they know they'll get paid their full salary either way. And that is why nobody respects Mark Davis. They take advantage of him. And they know they can get a fat paycheck if all they do is walk into the interview room and tell him what he wants to hear about how they love the Raiders and they want to bring them back to the glory days. He's gullible enough to fall for it. That's all I wanted to say. Nothing is going to change until someone else is the owner of the Raiders.
There you go. Bold take from Matt in Vegas. Mo, what do you think?
So I'll start here. I'll take the first half of the statement here and say coaches do care. Coaches want to win. No matter how much money you're paid, coaches want to win. No one wants to go through a 2-7 season. No one wants to be a loser. I'll start there. The part I do agree with Matt's call is there's a reason why the Raiders get the bottom of the barrel when it comes to these candidates. And I think one, obviously the quarterback situation wasn't appealing. Scott, do you remember when Jim Harbaugh was rumored to be coming back to the NFL? We all knew he was on his way back because of the sanctions at Michigan. And there was a lot of debate. Does he choose the Raiders? Is the team that he coached for, way back when? Does he choose the Chargers? Does he go to the Bears? And I've always said, while I would love Jim Harbaugh to coach the Raiders, he would have a much better situation in Los Angeles because he has a quarterback in place. Yes, the Chargers were serial underperformers and underachievers, but they had a young quarterback. Whether you like Justin Herbert or not, Justin Herbert was a better quarterback than what the Raiders had at the time when Jim Harbaugh was coming back to the NFL. So you got to look at the roster construction. If you're a head coach and you want to win, and head coaches know this, when you go to the NFL, you got to have the quarterback. And the Raiders haven't had that quarterback, haven't had a stability at the quarterback position, let alone a starting caliber one. But that's one. And then as Matt pointed out, now I can't speak for other people around the league on how they view Mark Davis. But when you look at the Raiders' instability, you look at the Raiders' recent history, as a head coach, you're looking at that situation, you're thinking, do I want to put myself into that situation and can I be successful there? Now, there are some head coaches that say, I can go into any situation and turn it into a winning situation. I think that's what fans want. They want that mentality. But if you're thinking about it practically and saying, I don't have access to a young quarterback, the roster is old in certain parts and needs to be rebuilt in several areas. They've had turnover the past several years now at the head coaching and GM positions. Is this a spot where I want to hang my reputation on? And I think if you're a younger head coach, you have more of that thought. If you're a retread, you're thinking, my reputation is set, I'll take the shot. But if you're a young head coach, because I've been saying now, the Raiders need to bring in a young head coach. If you're a young head coach thinking, I may not get another shot. If I fail at this, you may think twice about taking the Raiders' job.
Right. You like you said, you get one shot at it and you may get a second shot at it, but then you've just reset your clock. So if you go somewhere and you can't win in 2-3 years and they fire you, then you got to spend probably another 5 years as an assistant, work your way back up to a coordinator, and then you get your shot. So you're talking about a 7-year time period. That's a long time. And so you want to be careful when you do that. The only thing I'd say too, Matt, and it was a great call, the only thing I'd say too is that Josh McDaniels was in demand when the Raiders hired him. Now, there's a few teams who were after him. So was John Gruden. Now, John Gruden made the right choice for him because he knew Mark Davis would turn over everything. Now, some of the other teams probably weren't going to do that, but the Raiders definitely will. So I can see that criticism. It's kind of a mixed bag of Mark Davis there and giving John Gruden the complete keys to the kingdom when it came to the Raiders. All right. Now let's go out to our buddy Tarek. Here's Tarek.
God, Mo, what's up? This is Tarek calling you guys from Denver. Just kind of still reeling from that performance last night. I sat through that horror show for 60 minutes. I don't know what else to say. Can't run the ball. Can't throw the ball. Can't block. Special teams is atrocious. Yes, I'm talking to you, Daniel Carlson. You're officially a bum. It's unfortunate to see JP Dillon go down, without already being without Colton Miller. Thornton Jr., what a massive drop. Deep ball, they should have had it. Jack Bash, terrible mistakes. But at the same time, I put this on the coaching staff. You can't have these guys inactive and barely let them see the field and cut their teeth and suddenly throw them to the wolves the moment you get rid of Jakobi Meyer. 3 targets for Brock Bowers, inexcusable, 1 reception throughout the game. I will give major kudos to the defense. They definitely did everything they could. I do think part of it was the short week. I know that typically teams who play Thursday night football, you don't see the whole playbook. There's not the exact prep time that you'd have. So not taking anything away from them, but you typically Thursday night football is quite often sluggish. But we have hit rock bottom, you guys. The entire football world saw us on Thursday night playing terrible football in all phases. I got to ask you guys what your thoughts are at this point. What is John Spytek just the GM in name? Like, does he have authority over Pete Carroll, or is Pete Carroll running this show like a dictator? It seems like Pete Carroll is in complete control with anything and everything. You think, does Spytek have the ability to overrule him or put some things in his ear that, hey, Pete, this is what I need you to do? Potato Chip Kelly, again, just some really questionable play calling. And, when these guys take to the podium, Carroll and Geno at the end of the game, it's just the same crap every single week. I do give credit to Geno Smith for trying to grit it out. He was sacked 5 times at the half, 6 times overall. I believe Blu-Kelly had 2 interceptions. But again, our offense got gift-wrapped possessions at midfield at least 2 or 3 times. And we couldn't even get 3. We couldn't even turn it into anything. And that was just the theme of the night. But looking forward to you guys' show. I'll be staying in Denver. Unfortunately, I packed nothing but Raider gear. What was I thinking? God, I send you some photos and videos of the game. Please share them with Moe. And I look forward to hearing from you guys this week. Have a great one. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
I will. Tarek, thanks for the call. He was so excited. He was texting me photos when he was in Denver at the stadium there. And I felt so bad for him as I was watching the game, because I know when people invest their time and money to go see the Raiders on the road and it ends up like that, it is not good. 2 things I want to pick out of his call, Mo. Bear with me on this. One is one of the first points he was talking about was the 3 targets for Brock Bowers. How much of that can we blame on Chip Kelly, or how much of it falls on Geno Smith?
It's hard to put a certain percentage on it, but you got to put some of it on Chip Kelly, simply because I get the argument that because the offensive line was so atrocious at pass blocking that Brock Bowers has to stay in and block. But Mark John pointed this out on Tape Don't Lie. He can still get out on screens.
Yeah.
Remember, Brock Bowers is a very versatile playmaker.
It's
He's
huge,
not just
too.
a tight end. He can get out on screens. He can slip out after blocking. How many times do you see running backs block and then slip out into a passing lane and catch a short pass, right? There are certain things that they could have done with Brock Bowers where he could block and still catch the football on the same play. He is that awesome of a player. He can do both, yes. So I put that on Chip Kelly. With Geno Smith, he has to be looking for Brock Bowers, though, also on the field as the person with the football in his hands, right? There's no excuse for giving Brock Bowers 3 targets. This is something I railed about when Luke Getsy was the offensive coordinator. How many times when Luke Getsy was the offensive coordinator, Brock Bowers would end up with 5 or fewer targets, and it drove me nuts.
Yep.
And he still wound up with an all-pro year. There is no reason Brock Bowers should finish a game with anything under 7-8 targets with the way this offense is operating. If he doesn't have anything close to 10, then something is going wrong between Chip Kelly and Geno Smith.
Right, because even if you are having trouble with the pass blocking, to your point, you just got to find a way to scheme them in. You have to find a way. To your point about screen passes, it doesn't matter how. Hell, hand him the ball in the backfield. I don't care. You
They
just get
gave
his
him the
hand-
ball in jet sweeps. Why?
Exactly. Just get him
Try
on there.
something.
Oh boy. The second piece I forgot now. But anyway, Tarek, great call. We got time for one more call here on the show, and it is Raider Vengeance. Here he is.
Hey, Mo. Hey, Scott. This is Raider Vengeance calling from the 504 in New Orleans. Morning after very disappointing Thursday night football game against the Denver Broncos, losing 10-7. Just a couple thoughts. Clearly, our defense kept us in this game, but I don't know how much that is saying, because I think the Broncos offense was just begging us to win the game. And as stout as the defense looked, I think that the Denver offense was also just kind of, I don't know, not really bringing it, didn't really offer much of a challenge. Aside from that, I think it's very obvious that we are just devoid of depth and talent on the offensive side of the ball. It's criminal that Brock Bowers had, 3 receptions. I don't understand how you have a tool like him fully healthy and he's only targeted like 3 times in the first half. And then I just don't think that Denver shut him down. I think that there's clearly something going on. Geno is not it. I want him off the team. His body language is horrible. His play on the field is horrible. The way he reacts to bad plays is horrible. He seems to point at a lot of other players when things don't go his way. So it's a lack of accountability, I think, personal accountability. He sounds great at the podium, which is, I think, why he certainly gets praise from his coaches. I just don't get it. This year is not it. It's evaluation season. I don't think that a vast majority of the players on this team will be there next year, and I hope that we also have some coaches that aren't here next year. It is just hard to be a Raiders fan these days, but appreciate your show and everything that y'all do. And I guess it's on to another primetime game against the Cowboys on Monday Night Football. So there's that. Bye, y'all.
All right, there's Raider Vengeance. Thanks for the call, my man. We appreciate it as always. Mo, he started talking about the defense. Let's talk about that a little bit. What did you see from this? He talked about Blu-Kelly, who had a nice rebound game, right? And yes, Bo Nix has regressed much to the point where I'm seeing a lot of Bronco fans who want him benched. But the Broncos offense wasn't great, no question about it, but you play who you play, you have to perform. What did the defense do differently? What progress did you see that made you at least crack a smile in seeing how they were able to play against Denver?
Well, first of all, Denver's offense looked discombobulated. I will also give credit to the Raiders defense. You talked about it. The number one thing I've talked about for years with the Raiders defense is they need to start getting those turnovers, those takeaways. And shout out to Blu-Kelly. I've been hard on him for the past few weeks. I've been saying time and time again, he needs to be benched. Well, he came back and he had 2 interceptions. Now, I know tip passes, the tip drill, but you still have to get the hands on the football. And the Raiders, even on those tip drill passes, haven't come away with the takeaways. And Blu-Kelly came away with 2. The Raiders' cornerback group didn't have an interception coming into that game, Scott. It was Max Crosby, Devin White, and Isaiah Polomau had 2. Those are the only guys with interceptions on the roster going into last Thursday's game. And Blu-Kelly got on the board with 2 against the Broncos. So, number one, it was good to see them get those takeaways. The Raiders had to keep it up, though, because I saw also Tyree Wilson. A lot of people aren't going to talk about him because he didn't make these splashy plays, but I saw Tyree Wilson in the backfield a lot. He had Bo Nix running for his life on some snaps. So shout out to Tyree Wilson as well. But the Raiders have to continue to be aggressive in attacking the football and attacking the pocket. If they do and get more of those errant passes, they'll get more of those turnovers and they'll gift wrap more of those short fields to the offense. Now, the offense has to take advantage of it, which they didn't do against the Broncos. But you keep giving the offense the ball and seeing what they can do. One thing I will comment on about Raider Vengeance said, and I agree with him on this one, Geno Smith's body language concerns me a bit. So against the Jaguars, when he threw that interception, I believe, to Montaric Brown, he kind of publicly, I would say outwardly blamed Michael Mayer. You saw him motion like this, meaning you got to come. So I think Geno Smith needs to be careful about how he's criticizing outward in the open. You saw him come up to Raheem Mostert after he missed a block against the Broncos, and then he had to come up to him on the sideline and say, it's all good. We got this. We got this. You have to be careful as a leader of a football team, as a quarterback. If you rub guys the wrong way, you have to know how to motivate certain guys. Some guys need the in-face motivation. Some guys, you need to kind of bring them along gently a little bit. But you got to be careful with your leadership style and how you criticize people publicly. You can do it behind closed doors all you want. But when you're out in the public eye, you have to be careful with that.
Yeah, the Mostert one, and he did. He completely missed a block. But at the same time, I think the frustration that Geno Smith is having with his own play, that's what good leaders do, is they don't let that frustration bleed over in how you treat your other teammates. You can't, to your point, you can't do that as a leader on the field, especially in the public eye. Like you said, I don't care what you do for a living. You got an issue with somebody, you take them on the side so they can save face, so to speak. You don't do it in public. And that was on the sideline. And then you saw him on the sideline going and trying to kind of recoup his respect, if you will, from others by doing that. And a couple of the players you could tell were just not having it, by the way. But, you know, that is what it is. This is what happens as a season like this drones on. It gets tough. So you have to stay positive in light of everything going wrong. So good pickup there by Raider Vengeance. All right, that's going to do it for the show. Mo, I know here we sit on Tuesday. You got some stuff coming up. Let everybody know what's going on in Bleacher Report Live and with your writing.
So I got a Jackson Powers Johnson video up on Bleacher Report. I'll also talk about a topic we discussed today a bit. Is Tom McMahon going to be the first and last head coach to be fired by the Raiders this season? You probably know my answer to that because I talked about it in segment 2. But I do think there's at least one other head coach who could be fired before the end of the year. And of course, I'll be back with you on Thursday for Silver and Black Today.
Indeed, we will. We appreciate you guys all being with us. Make sure, if you're watching us on the video, make sure you like the video, make sure you subscribe, hit the notifications bell, and leave a comment below. Tell us what you think of the show. Tell us what you think of the Raiders. Go right in. Have fun at that. Also, make sure you follow Mo on X at Moe Moton, MoeMoton. I am at LV Gully to show SNB today. We appreciate it. We'll get back here with you on Thursday, Raider Nation. For our producer, Mike Robier, for Mo, I am Scott Gulbransen. This has been Silver and Black Today. Have a great day, everybody.